So, your book talks a lot about financialization, and there's a word that is used, and maybe it's overused in our modern lexicon that I think is relevant here. And I would just ask you to define it to help us because it's so nebulous sometimes. Neoliberalism. We hear the term neoliberalism over and over again, neoliberal policies, etc. What is neoliberalism? Can you define it for us? And is it just a synonym for a financialized economy, or is there more to it? Is it about the international flow of capital? How would you describe neoliberalism?
Well, liberalism has always meant get rid of the state. It means reduce the state. And the liberals in the 19th century wanted to get rid of the state when it was controlled by the landlord class, the House of Lords in England, the House of Parliament in Europe, or the Senate in the United States. Liberalism was to get rid of the hereditary landlord and monopoly class to get a free market. But neoliberalism reverts this. Neoliberalism say we want to get rid of any state that is strong enough to regulate finance, to regulate monopolies, or to protect the public interest against the rentier class. So neoliberalism is the counter-revolution against classical economics and against the whole dynamic of industrial capitalism, which was trying to get rid of the rentier class. That it's basically a counter-revolution.
So that would be Milton Friedman pushing back on John Maynard Keynes, or is that an oversimplification?
No, that's pretty much it. When Friedman said the corporations should not take into account the public interest, he added that the government itself should not take into account the public interest. The job of the government, he said, is to simply let everybody make as much money as they can, however they can. And of course, the big advocates of neoliberalism are the criminals, the gangsters, because they don't want the police. Well, the monopolists don't want the regulatory antitrust police. The drug companies don't want any kind of anti-monopoly. So essentially, you have what's called a free market, and a free market means the wealthiest people that dominate the market, and that the supply of credit, the management of the economy that allocates credit and who gets what should shift from Washington to Wall Street. It should shift from the government to the financial sector, and the financial sector should essentially do the planning. Well, the problem with this is the financial sector lives in the short run. So neoliberalism means only look for the next 3 months, the next year's balance sheet, because the free market is so complex, you don't know what's going to happen. Well, of course, if you're managing it from Wall Street, you do know what's going to happen, but you don't want to tell people exactly what's going to happen.
So, are neoliberalism and financialization intimately intertwined in that way? Can one exist without the other?
New, it is the financial sector that has pushed neoliberalism, because the financial sector wants to prevent any government from controlling the supply of credit. Just compare the US system to China's system, for instance. What makes China unique is doing what industrial capitalism in the 19th century hoped would occur. The government creates the credit, and by creating money in the credit with the Bank of China, that it creates credit to spend into the economy, to build high-speed railroads, to build housing. China's banks do not make money for corporate takeovers or for speculative purposes, but for the real economy. Neoliberalism tries to essentially make money financially, because that's the quickest way to make it. And neoliberalism focuses on creating credit, not to create new means of production, but to buy existing means of production. And this began already before World War One. When the Federal Reserve was created, it took out of the Treasury all of the functions the Treasury had, and the Treasury representative was not even allowed on the Federal Reserve. Everything was shifted basically to Wall Street and Philadelphia and Boston and other financial centers. So, and the at that time, banks were known as the mother of trusts. If you wanted to make money financially, you would buy all the different copper companies and you'd make a copper trust. You'd merge them. You'd buy up all of the steel companies and make the steel trust to charge monopoly prices. The easiest way to make money is not to produce, but to be a rent extractor, be a monopolist, and get in a position where people have to buy what you're producing, and don't have any regulatory agency to prevent you from charging whatever you want for basic needs, like you're seeing in healthcare, education, and everything that's driving the economy into debt. So the effect of neoliberalism is to drive more and more families into debt. And the more debt they have, the less money they have to spend on goods and services. So we end up looking like a country that has to borrow from the IMF, going into an austerity program.